Prime Minister Mark Carney is continuing his trip to Europe today, while his Canada-U.S. trade minister is on his way to Washington to try to hammer out some kind of trade deal.
Yeah, so for more on the top headlines of federal politics, we're joined live by CTV News political commentator Tom Mulcair. Good to see you, Tom.
Good to be with you, Courtney.
Let's start by talking about this announcement from the Prime Minister's office. Mark Carney saying that there is this critical minerals agreement with Germany now. Yeah. Sounds like there's a chance here for us to really further develop some of our key minerals, including things like nickel.
Exactly. And it's what we have to do because, as Carney has said since the election campaign, our trade relationship with the United States will never be the same. So we've got to start working with partners, and why not start in countries that have a lot in common with us in terms of institutions and past relationships. So he was in Poland, setting up a very big trade deal there, then into Germany, looking at critical minerals and energy, a strategic partnership there, the type of thing that we're going to need to build on for the future, because we have to make sure that we can continue letting the Canadian economy grow. And one of the problems, of course, that we're having right now is the total abject unpredictability of everything coming out of Washington, which leads to your second point. You mentioned Dominic LeBlanc going down to meet with Howard Lutnick. Now, those are two people who have the experience and the expertise to actually get to a deal. I think that LeBlanc's been doing a good job, and I think that Lutnick has the ear of President Trump. So let's see if the removal of those extra tariffs, that we pulled off last week. Mr. Carney said, look, we're not going to tariff anything that should be coming in free under the Canada-U.S. Mexico trade deal. That was a wise move, although it left a lot of people scratching their heads saying that was one of the only things we did to hit back at the U.S. But I think he did the right thing, and there's hope on that horizon as well.
Yeah, Tom, it's interesting, on that, sort of removing of those sort of counter tariffs there, a lot of people have said, Mark Carney talked a lot about elbows up in the campaign, but it seems he's more taking an elbows down approach. And you've already alluded to the sort of, erratic behavior coming out of the White House here. So what do you make of that approach? Is that the right approach, sort of take tariffs away or counter tariffs away, kind of put the elbows down and try to, talk through this?
That's exactly where we are right now. And I think that the Americans were quite clever on this, because in all the bluster and the baloney that came out of Trump, he was going to tariff absolutely everything under the sun. But when the dust started to settle, Nick, we realized that the Americans had cleverly avoided almost completely touching anything that should come in under the Canada-U.S. Mexico trade deal. And why is that important? Well, we were putting the Americans on the right side of the negotiation. We were putting them on the right side of the law, and we'd gone in the opposite direction. Instead of doing what we did with the digital services tax, where we just gave it away without negotiating it, we were right, by the way, to get rid of the thing. It targeted American companies. You can't deny that. But instead of negotiating it away, we just gave away something that could have been part of a larger deal. So this time, at least, we've learned from that. We're no longer negotiating against ourselves. Prime Minister Carney had a very serious talk with Trump about this, and Trump confirmed publicly what Carney had already said was part of their discussion, that getting rid of those counter tariffs was going to open up for a wider discussion and work on the final deal. And I do think that we're going to see a breakthrough very soon.
Well, that's what everybody's hoping for, right? Given the repercussions that we're dealing with every day, depending on what the White House does. Another announcement that came from Carney's office during this trip to Europe, talking about the plans to purchase more submarines for our defense, looking at possibly Germany or South Korea. What do you make of that announcement and those two options coming from those two countries?
Absolutely essential that we start adding to our military capabilities. We've really let the side down within NATO. We're supposed to all be heading to a 5% of GDP expenditure in NATO. This is a perfect example of what Canada has to be doing. We bought some jalopies from the Brits 20 years ago. The things never worked. They were a disaster. And so what we're going to have now are top of the line, extremely modern submarines coming from either South Korea or Germany. If I were to make a bet, I would say the Germans are going to get this contract. And since it's a dozen of this, very high-performing submarine, we're looking at an expenditure of tens of billions of dollars overall. They're not giving the exact figure simply because they don't want to upset the negotiations. But I think that it's a good move. We have 3 oceans. We've got the longest shoreline in the world, and we've got almost nothing to throw at it to patrol our own waters. So this will be a good step in the right direction. We've got to build out a great deal more. We'll have no trouble meeting the 5% because we've been so far behind during the Trudeau years.
Yeah, we're playing a real catch-up indeed. Okay, that is CTV News political commentator Tom Mulcair. Appreciate the time this morning, Tom. Thanks so much.
All the best, Nick. Take care.
Okay, take care.
Bye, Courtney.